All right, joining us now with more, Republican Whip Steve Scalise, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and the newest leader of the Republicans in the House, GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik. Welcome, all of you. All right, we can spend this interview talking about Liz Cheney, but I don't really care about Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney decided that she knew better than the rest of the caucus. But I'll give you, Kevin McCarthy, your thoughts on why it was that the entire caucus pretty much wanted her out.
Well, remember, we serve the pleasure of the conference. And what the conference was looking for is exactly what you were just talking about. How are we going to make sure that we secure the border, stop the socialism, save our nation? Because this is not where we were 18 months ago. This is where we were back during the Jimmy Carter time. So let's not look back. Let's look forward. And I'm excited about Elise Stefanik coming into this leadership team, because Joe Biden is not just ignoring the problems, he's igniting them. This inflation that's just hit us, we have not seen in 2 decades. That's a tax increase on every American. And these are the battles that we have to have. Listening to you earlier, Sean, sounds like you've been inside our conference, because that's exactly what our agenda is. That's what we're taking to the American public. But we're going to fight on the floor now to stop this agenda that Pelosi and the socialists are trying to bring forward.
Yeah, and we could probably take out a betting line how soon it will be that Liz Cheney's new friends will be calling her father a war criminal again, attacking Scooter Libby again, and, raising ethical challenges of her father as it relates to his work with Halliburton, because those are the people that are now praising her, the ones that called her father a war criminal. Side issue. All right, Congresswoman, let me ask you about this position. The ACU did have you at a lower conservative rating than Liz Cheney. The agenda that I just laid out, which is pretty much the Trump agenda, the Make America Great Again agenda, America First agenda, do you disagree with any of the items that I think Republicans ought to be focusing on?
I agree with all of the items, Sean, that you laid out. And most importantly, voters across this country agree. We are experiencing multiple crises under President Biden and Speaker Pelosi. We have a border crisis, we have an economic crisis, and we have a national security crisis in the Middle East. Republicans are going to fight on behalf of American families who are concerned about the radical direction this administration is taking us. We are unified as Republicans, and I am proud to be a strong conservative Republican that is going to work to unite our Republican conference and stand up for the American people.
You know, Steve Scalise, Congressman, I've been watching what's been happening, and I'm very concerned. We saw this hack on America's energy sector. We now know ransom was paid. Did Joe Biden have a part to play in that? I don't know. We see inflation now at its highest number in 12 years, 4.2%. We have 10 million jobs available, Americans getting paid, many of them more money from the government to stay home. How do we get out of this mess? And we've got to help Israel, and I don't see help forthcoming from the administration.
Right, Sean. That's why it's so important to have a united front and stand up against this radical agenda. And look, Joe Biden's failure of leadership is on full display, but it's hurting American families. Right on day one, he cancels the Keystone Pipeline, killing thousands of good jobs. He puts a ban on permits and leases on federal lands. You wonder why in southeast part of the country, the whole Atlantic seaboard, they're waiting in lines to get gasoline. They're paying $5, $6 a gallon for gasoline. Joe Biden, by the way, emboldened OPEC, allowed Russia to start bringing oil into the United States. We were producing our own under President Trump because we're energy dominant and we're able to help our friends. What's going on in Israel right now is a clear example that this president is being tested, and so far he has failed to rise to the occasion. You've got to stand with our allies. Israel absolutely has a right to defend themselves. But right now, you've got some leaders on the Democrat side in Congress that are criticizing Israel openly. He's not standing up to them. He's hurting hardworking families right now, killing jobs. Inflation is through the roof. Look at the lumber prices right now. Anything you buy at the grocery store is up. And Joe Biden is paying people not to work, as you pointed out, when there's 10 million people, job openings, small businesses that can't run their businesses properly. You're waiting months right now to get a refrigerator or another appliance. This is what Joe Biden's doing. His leadership is absent right now when we need it.
You know, Kevin McCarthy, your hands are tied, I would argue, a lot more than, say, Mitch McConnell. It's a 50-50 split. And if the legislative filibuster, if they want to remove it, they would need one Republican to make that happen. Because the Republicans, if they stay united, they don't have to provide a quorum for the votes on the legislative filibuster or packing the courts. You don't have that freedom, but you're only, what, 5 seats away from a majority.
We're only 5 seats away, but that's true. If you're worried about the filibuster, the best thing to do, change the House. Because if the Republicans control the House, you'll never worry about the filibuster. H.R. 1 and those won't get there. What we were watching right now, and I was in the Oval Office this week with the President, the Vice President, and the other leaders. I asked him about, are we going to pay for the ransomware? I asked him about the border. He literally said he inherited a worse problem, which is not true. We just arrested 174,000 in April. Yes. And you know what I also talked to him about? I told him my biggest fear was the inflation, the economy that he's creating. These trillions of dollars from government when you have a supply constraint. Every economist will tell you what he's doing is wrong, and then he's rewarding people for staying home. And he tried to move to say, I signed an executive order. I said, you need to get out of the White House, go see the small businesses who I talk to every day, and understand the problems of what's happening.
Yeah. Let me ask your observations, because I kind of see Joe as a little bit out of it, well, a little bit more than out of it, a little checked out. And I'm concerned that I'm not the only one that sees it. As a matter of fact, everybody I talk to says they see it. What did you feel? Because I saw the picture. You were socially distanced. You all had your masks on, et cetera. Now I guess you don't have to wear the mask. We'll see next time.
You know, the only reason why they changed not wearing the mask? Because gasoline went to $7 and there was gasoline lines. They wanted to change the news. We could have stopped wearing our masks long ago. I walked out. I believe in the vaccine. I've been vaccinated. I don't need to wear the mask. We need to get back to work, back to school, back to health, and back to normal. It's simple. That's the only thing we should be focused on. What
observations did you see as it relates to the president? Did he seem engaged? Did he have a high level of energy? You've been around Donald Trump. You've been around Joe Biden. What's the difference between the two men?
Look, this is the first time I saw Joe Biden as president since he's been in. I saw him on the inaugural and the State of the Union night. He didn't. He was with it, and he was engaging, and he was giving me numbers, and he was talking. But at no time, having known Joe Biden for quite some time, does he have the energy of Donald Trump. We both know it. Donald Trump didn't need to sleep 5 hours a night, and he would be engaged. If you called Donald Trump, he'd get on the phone before staff would. He'd bring other people down. In his first week, he had a bipartisan, bicameral meeting inside the White House. This was the first time they had any bipartisan meeting, and think of the crises that are happening. They have ignored them, but they're igniting them at the same time.
Congresswoman, in this new position, what do you see as the most important role that you're going to be playing, knowing that you have a few people out there, Adam Kinzinger, et cetera, that didn't want you in that position? You had a challenge from Chip Roy. How do you now, I guess, maybe allay fears of people that maybe don't know where you stand on issues?
Well, first of all, I represent a district that voted for President Obama twice and voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. It tells the story of today's Republican Party, how we've grown this party among working class Americans, people who work hard every day and know that the far left and radical agenda of the Social Democrats is taking us in the wrong direction. The role of the conference chair is to share our unified conservative message. So focusing on exposing these multiple crises that American people are suffering, the border crisis, the economic crisis, and the national security crisis in the Middle East. We are focused on reopening our economy, reopening our schools, and fighting for the hardworking American people that have been left behind by President Joe Biden and Speaker Pelosi. I think it's telling that President Joe Biden spends more time in the White House than he does across America. When I visit small businesses in my district and manufacturers, they have jobs available, but they can't hire people to fill those jobs because the Democrats want an incentive not to work. We want to get people back to work, back on their feet, back to school. This is an agenda that works across America, whether you're in New York, Texas, Minnesota, Louisiana, or California.
Yeah. Steve Scalise, a little off topic, but I want to ask you, and I think this is important. I noticed this week that the FBI director did not declare the shooting in the ball field where you nearly lost your life. And that is a fact, because you had told us as much, and other people told me as much. Won't say that it's an act of domestic terrorism, but yet there's all these efforts to classify all these hate groups as domestic terrorists. What is your reaction to it?
Well, Sean, my colleague Brad Wenstrup had raised this with the new FBI director, and Director Wray actually acknowledged this is something that he wants to look into. McCabe was the acting director when somehow they came up with a classification of suicide by cop.
My understanding is Director Wray weighed in. My understanding is he weighed in on this.
Yeah, and I think we have a chance of getting this changed. We're asking the FBI, number one, get the classification right. It was not suicide by cop. Every other agency called it domestic terrorism. By the way, the two police officers who were there with me today, both heroes, both shot during the shootout, but they were plainclothes officers. They weren't even wearing police uniforms. And he tried to kill them like he was trying to kill all of us. And so let's get the classification right. But also we've asked, who was behind this decision and why did they make that original classification of suicide by cop, which it's not?
The ball's in your hands, guys. You're the leaders. Good luck. America needs an opposition party. We wish you luck.
We're fighting for freedom.
Amen.
Thank you, Sean.